got a very special episode of the Blockchain Report for you, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Today's guest is a man who has truly done it all. Hedge fund boss, White House firecracker, author, TV personality, and now one of the loudest, proudest voices in the world of Bitcoin. He's been on the inside of Wall Street, the belly of Washington, and now he's riding high on the frontier of crypto, shaping the future one bold move at a time. He's sharp, he's fearless, and he's rarely seen without a perfectly folded pocket square. Like him or love him, you always know where he stands. Please give a Roxom TV welcome to the man, the myth, the mooch, the one and only Anthony Scaramucci. Oh. Anthony, they love you. They love you. Welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here today.
what an intro, Hank. You know, you said I was a Washington firecracker as opposed to fired cracker, which I guess is pretty good because I was fired. But I don't really think I'm a cracker. You know, I do know crackers, and some of them work for Trump, but I'm not one of those. But anyway, it's great to be on, and congratulations on the show. And in the green room before you brought me on, I said, and I quote, that you look like Prince Harry and Prince William had a baby together, and it made you, Hank. All right, so you'll get some mileage out of that, okay? You know,
I think my mom's got some explaining to do.
Looking sharp with that quasi beard and so forth.
I appreciate it. Quasi for me is a compliment at this point. It's about as best I can do. So I certainly appreciate the words, Anthony. We're super excited to have you on the show today. And every time I see you in the news, you're doing something new. Finance, author, TV host, politics. You even had a fake celebrity Big Brother house guest cameo. And now you're a Bitcoin evangelist. Is there like a master plan here, or do you just love reinventing yourself?
It's such a great question. I mean, I don't have a master plan as much as I have a intellectual curiosity for things. So I accidentally went to the White House, actually. So, I mean, just tell the story quickly. I was a Wall Street private banker at Goldman Sachs. That was sort of my first legit job. And I didn't know anybody. I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood. I didn't know how to do the job. They gave you a desk, a telephone, and a business card. This is pre-cell phones, pre-even email, if you could believe this is how old I am. And I was like, how the hell am I going to do this job? And so it became clear to me that I could meet wealthy individuals and their families if I went into politics. And I started writing checks into the political world. I became a political fundraiser. I wrote my first check to Rudolph Giuliani in 1993 when he was running for mayor. I was Young Republicans for him. And that got me into the world of politics. Writing, I've always wanted to be in the writing world. If I had real balls, Hank, I would have went to Hollywood. I would have wrote screenplays. I would have been a little bit of an actor. I'm short enough to be an actor, Hank. Right? I know I look tall on television because they let me sit on phone books for these TV appearances. But right now, my feet, I could just assure you, my feet are not touching the ground. I'm sort of as tall as the prince in the first Shrek movie, but that's like Tom Cruise tall. You know what I mean? Ben Stiller tall.
Yeah, that plays.
But I didn't have the balls. You know, I grew up out here on Long Island, and I'm like, okay, I gotta figure out a way to become financially independent. What is the safest way to do that? That was to go to Wall Street, find my journey on Wall Street. Ended up starting my own business, tied into politics through the fundraising. But my true love is writing. My true love is reading. I have a podcast called Open Book, which I do every week. I interview an author of a book. And so the books are all over here in my office. And I read the book, and then the author comes on. So if you write a book, Hank, you got to come on my show. I've had a lot of Bitcoiners on. I've had historians, fiction writers. That's the stuff I really, really like. And so you will find me in certain reality shows. You'll find me certain cameos in certain streaming services that are coming up where I'm actually, in one, I'm playing myself. Another one, I'm playing a lawyer. I've been cut from movies. I've actually gone out and been in they give me the script. I read it. I'm in the role, action, take one, action, take two. And I said, what happened to it? Oh, you were on the cutting room floor. You know, so it's a bit fun. I mean, I guess I would say to you, you're a young guy. How old are you, Hank?
Take a guess, just so I can have this in writing.
25? How old are you? I mean,
my God. I'm in my late 30s.
You're in your
So
late
I
30s. All right,
remember
you're holding.
pre-email too. Yeah,
All right, you're looking good. You're looking good. You must have a nice filter on for the blockchain report. But
guys, cut the
what I
filter.
would say to you, what I would say to you in your late 30s is just do stuff and push yourself. Anytime I'm pushing myself, I'm having more fun. And when I'm not pushing myself, I feel like I'm a little bored. So I try to push myself.
I love that. And you got to give yourself a little bit of credit here, Anthony. You said, I think you don't have big balls, but I think you got to have some major cojones with your career from the White House to politics, to film. So let's give yourself a little bit of credit, especially in the arena of Bitcoin, right?
Well, I appreciate that. I am a risk taker, but let me rephrase that. I told my son, my oldest son is 32. I didn't have big enough balls to do exactly what I wanted at 22. I went to law school because I thought that was a safety thing and it would protect my income. I also looked at my parents and my dad's wages, Hank, and I'm like, they're going to run out of money. So I have to figure this out. And yeah, in my business career, I have let my balls drag a little bit. But in my early start of my career, I didn't vector into something that I really loved. I vectored on a Wall Street, and then I had to do some eclectic things to keep me interested. So, I mean, I don't know. Is this an X-rated show, an R-rated show, a PG? Like, how would you rate the show?
I think PG-13 sounds appropriate.
All right, so I think this is a PG-13 story. Okay, I was on the beach. Have you ever see any of my sons? I have 4 of them. I was walking with my 2 older sons on the beach about 10 years ago. So they were a lot younger. I looked at the 2 of them. I said, I'm pissed at you. And they said, well, what are you pissed at? I said, well, look, I can see your footprints on this beach. And they said, yes, so? I said, well, I want your balls. I want your balls to be so big that they're actually dragging on the beach and they're scupping up your footprints. Okay? And that's how you got to live. That's how you got to live your life. Okay, Hank? Think
Totally.
about that, okay? You gotta let it hang out. You gotta throw the ball. You gotta get intercepted. You gotta get your head cleaned. I got fired from the White House. I got shot out of the front door of the White House into Pennsylvania Avenue, rolled in margarita salt. They shit on me on Saturday Night Live. They went off on me on all these late night. I mean, I think I was called a Jersey Shore cast member, a Tony Soprano on the Potomac. I mean, I heard it all.
Not bad.
And you know what? I mean, who cares? Who cares? Get up, dust yourself off, and get back in the game. I think that's the message, But when you're on the beach,
absolutely.
When you're on the beach, Hank, make sure there's no footprints, man.
I mean, you got to have some big cojones, especially when you've been in Bitcoin. I mean, you've been through rough markets and the good ones as well, right? And what was kind of the aha moment for you that convinced you that Bitcoin wasn't just another tech trend and in fact something a lot more?
I mean, okay, so again, this is a great question, and my brain is on fire with trying to answer it succinctly. So I'm just going to say this to you. I was in a White House meeting, as crazy as this is, and I can tell you that I can remember the day. It happened on a Wednesday. You know why I know? Because I was only there for one Wednesday. Okay, so I know it was a Wednesday. And I was sitting in the Roosevelt room with 2 guys that were writing a paper from the Fed on the digitization of the US dollar. You could find that if you go look it up. It's 7 or 8 years ago now. I remember looking at those. I'm like, so you mean like on the blockchain? And they're like, yeah, on the blockchain. So I was 53 at the time. And I looked at that and I said, wow, I'm really out to lunch. I must be a dinosaur. People told me about Bitcoin in 2012. I dismissed it. Told me again about it in 2014. I dismissed it. It's now 2017. And the Fed is talking about digitizing the US dollar. I got to get up to speed on Bitcoin. And so that was my aha moment. I ended up getting fired a couple days later. I went out and bought the website, skybridgebitcoin.com. And then talk about balls. I didn't have the balls to buy Bitcoin. So that was November of 2017. I waited, okay, and I put a checklist together. And that wait cost me some money, frankly. And Bitcoin did roll. I don't know if you remember that year. It was at 20,000. It shot back down to 3,800. It was climbing again. I bought my first Bitcoin at 16,000. Could have been October, November of 2020. But I waited, and I had a checklist. And on the checklist was, number 1, if I was going to buy 9 figures of Bitcoin for my clients and myself, where could I store it? Because I didn't want to store it in a cold wallet with phrases, and plus it's an institutional money management company. Had to make sure it was somewhere safe. Number two, what were the regulations? Could I get comfortable that the U.S. would fairly and propitiously regulate Bitcoin? And then number three, and this was also an important one, would it scale? Would we get to 100 million wallets? Because if we got to 100 million wallets through the network effect and exponential adoption, I was pretty confident it could get to 1 billion wallets. I think it's 5 years since my first Bitcoin purchase. I think we're at 300 million wallets. So we're 3x. There's no reason why we couldn't double that in 5 years. Am I right? It's about 300 million wallets. Am I more or less right?
Sounds right. Yeah, I think
okay,
so.
So I'm just saying, like, 5 more years, could it be 600 to 1 billion? Possibly. And then it's in such short supply. And let me just make this point, because the regulations are going in our favor right now. But when I made that decision in 2020, the regulations were not in our favor. Donald Trump was president, and he was railing on Bitcoin. You may not remember that, but he was sending out negative tweets. The Biden administration, Elizabeth Warren, hated Bitcoin. But I made the bet that since the IRS deemed Bitcoin as intangible property, once they made that decision, one of the things about our country that's made it so successful is the predictability of our laws, and in specific, as it relates to capitalism, the predictability of property rights in the United States. They go all the way back to the Magna Carta, 900 years of precedent and property. And it's very hard to take your property away from you if you own property in the US. And so I figured we would win court cases, even if the regulators weren't on our side, which of course started happening. And now, of course, we got the regulators on our side. There's some nonsense going along with it, like meme coins and tariffs and things like that. But it's going to be a good 4 to 5 years. And then I'll make a prediction here on your network, on the Block Report. The Democrats, the majority of them that are running for elected office in 2026 will be Bitcoiners, will be pro-crypto. I don't think they want to go into the buzzsaw that they experienced in 2024.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I got some exciting news for you. 460 million active wallets right now. So we're on our way, which is very exciting.
Good, awesome. So I'm gonna start using that number now. I'm gonna steal it from the blockchain report. But so it's an interesting number, because the Glassnode number that I saw in October, November of 2020 was 84 million. So you're 6 to 1 roughly in the 5 years. So just think about that. Imagine the 480 going to 1 billion. How could the Bitcoin price not go to 300,000 or 400,000? I believe it will. And I believe there's a lot of institutional adoption coming. And so for these reasons, not saying it won't be volatile, and you know that more volatile assets that have asymmetric, more upside volatility than downside volatility, those do better generally. And that's how you get rich.
Yeah.
You know the single thing that made all these tech billionaires rich? Ready? Security restriction. Because just hear me out for a second. If I am a tech guy and I launch a company like Amazon, I have to subject myself to a lockup on the IPO. Moreover, if I'm going to sell, you usually have to sell through 144, and you have to sell quarterly, so it doesn't look like you have any insider information. I just want you to think about this. That saved everybody, because as those companies grew, they were sitting on monster positions, these companies. And so what I would say to people that own Bitcoin, think like the old school tech entrepreneurs. Think like Steve Ballmer, by the way. And just hear me out for a second. Steve Ballmer came into Microsoft late. He wasn't one of the original guys. He was a roommate of Bill Gates at Harvard. He got there late. He ultimately became the CEO. Company, frankly, didn't even do that well while he was CEO. He had 1/6 of the holdings of Bill Gates. But Steve Ballmer, Hank, did something that you and I and everybody listening need to do with Bitcoin. Hold it. Don't sell it. Okay? Yeah. And Ballmer is now richer than Gates because he never sold one share of his Microsoft stock.
Yeah, I want to buy the Bulls just like he bought the Clippers. So that's some good advice. I'm going to never
buy
sell my
buy
BTC.
more Bitcoin, sit on it, and you'll have your shot.
Oh, I can't wait. And you've actually mentioned previously, you mentioned some price predictions in the 100,000s. You've said that you think Bitcoin could reach up to 200K this year, yet still we're not seeing it really adopted on the mainstream level that we would expect at this point. What do you think is keeping Bitcoin from actually reaching those high highs that we've been anticipating for kind of a while now?
You have a cycle in Bitcoin. You have renters and you have holders, or as we say in the industry, hodlers. And you had a lot of renters come into Bitcoin after the election results. And so Bitcoin shot up. I guess it was 68,000 before the election, went to 108 prior to the inauguration. And I think it's now, I don't know, 85, 86,000, something like that. But if you step back, if you zoomed out, and let me put you and I in March of 2023, 2 short years ago, I can tell you that I was on my ass. I was looking for CPR, okay, and I think January Bitcoin was at 16,000. So if you told me we're going to go from 16,000 to 86,000, and whether you like Donald Trump or dislike Donald Trump, the president's administration is pro crypto and pro Bitcoin. And we would have $150 billion worth of the asset in ETFs that were legalized in the United States in January of 2024, I would have been like dancing on the ceiling. So what happens to all of us is that we reset our brains. We looked at our NAV when Bitcoin was at 108, and now we're saddened when we're staring at the same NAV when Bitcoin's at 86,000. And I would just ask people to remember that you have holders, which I would like everybody on this call, everybody on this program to be, and then you have renters. And so the renters come in and they trade it. And when there's bad news in the market, or there's some uncertainty, or there's tariffs or things like that, it will trade off as the renters pull themselves out of Bitcoin. But I still see, because of the supply demand table, I still see Bitcoin getting to, let's call it 175 to 200,000 by the end of the year, just because a 1% allocation by 5 of the largest fund managers would be getting you halfway there. I mean, you'd be at the 150s, so it doesn't take a lot.
Totally. But there still seems to be some traditional finance icons like Warren Buffett, for instance, that are still calling Bitcoin a bubble. What do you think they're missing? And what's like the biggest misconception that you still hear from that traditional finance world?
Well, I'm going to tell a quick story about Warren Buffett because I think it's elemental to what you're saying. Okay. And I told this story at the AI conference that I went to in HumanX, it was called, and it was in Las Vegas about 3 weeks ago. I was sitting at the Allen & Company conference in 1999. Mr. Jeff Bezos, a contemporary of mine, was on stage giving a rendition of Amazon and explaining, at that time, take you back 26 years ago, Amazon was being priced as a quote unquote overvalued internet bookseller. And what Jeff was trying to tell people is, hey, I'm just selling books right now so I can reverse engineer and dot plot the warehousing around the United States. I'm going to sell A to Z. And when I turn that spigot on, this thing is going to be a money printer. And people looked at that. I took copious notes. I said, this guy's a genius. I'm going home. I'm going to buy myself some Amazon. The next guy to speak was Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett got up there and he said, what a lovely presentation. But can you believe that internet bookseller is valued at a larger price, enterprise value-wise, than the storied retailer Sears Roebuck? And think about all the real estate that Sears Roebuck has around the country, and yet this internet-based machinery selling books is valued more than it. And you know what I did? And I'm embarrassed to tell you this. I ripped up my notes, and I did not buy Amazon on that day. But if you did, if you bought Amazon on that day, a $10,000 investment's worth $17 million today. But I didn't buy it. And by the way, you would have had to subject yourself to 8 times where Amazon went down 50%, 1 time where it went down 90%. But if you just held Amazon, you flew to Mars, came back 26 years later, 10 grand goes to 17 million, 100 grand goes to 170 million. And the reason I bring this up is that Warren Buffett has not been right about everything. He too is one of the most brilliant investors in the world, incredibly clear thinker on so many different things. But I submit to you that Mr. Buffett has not done the homework on Bitcoin. Because if he does the homework on Bitcoin, he'll understand the tangible and intangible value that Bitcoin represents. He'll understand that the network and the ability of the network to solidify your transactions in a trustless way. And I don't really like the word trustless because we are trusting something. We're trusting the hundreds of thousands of nodes that are connected into the Bitcoin network that verify the transaction. So I would say it differently. We don't have to trust one specific third party. We've endowed the network with the ability to sanctify our transactions. And the value of that, I think, is quite large. And, Saylor thinks it's worth 7% of global assets. All I'm saying is it's worth the market capitalization of gold. And if it's at 1.8 trillion today, could it trade to 20 trillion over the next 10 years? I believe it could. And I think it's the best investment that I've seen. And that's why I'm in it. And that's why I have this long-term faith in it. But Buffett hasn't done the homework, generally doesn't like technology. Okay, guys like Jamie Dimon, why do they need to go near Bitcoin? They're getting shit on left and right by regulators. Until you get clarity from the regulators, why do you need to be in the crosshairs and lauding Bitcoin as the head of the most successful American commercial bank? So I get it, but I would also submit to you Paul Tudor Jones, Ray Dalio. I would tell you that those guys have looked at this thing. Pete Brigger, Michael Novogratz, the Winklevoss twins, anybody that really does the homework on this, Stan Druckenmiller. I believe if you put 100 people that were genius investors in a room and you told them, okay, you got 6 months, study Bitcoin, you pulled them out of the room, 95 of them would go towards Bitcoin. Maybe there would be 5% that would say no, but it's hard to find somebody that really does the homework, that doesn't like the asset and want to put a portion, some amount of money into that asset.
100%. The writing's on the wall for anyone who's willing to read it. It's kind of what it seems like right now. So we're about halfway through our time. So I want to loosen things up a little bit with some quick hits in our lightning round. It's fun. It's fast.
I'm loosening up.
Loosen it up. Yeah, get nice and loose.
I'm ready.
I'm going to give you two options. You just pick one. No explanation needed. You ready to rock?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Okay, Bitcoin, better as a store of value or as a medium of exchange?
Store of value.
Regulation or decentralization?
I mean, what do I like better? What do you mean? Like what word do I like better?
Which one do you like better? Yeah, like which one do you think is more appropriate?
I like decentralization better, but I think you're going to get both. But go ahead. Let's say decentralization.
Yeah, totally. Love it. Satoshi Nakamoto, a 3-letter agency or a single man?
I'm going to say neither of those. I'm going to say a group of programmers. There's a great book out. There's a great book out right now called The Mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto. It's by Benjamin Wallace. He's a phenomenal writer, and he can't find Satoshi. I can't find Satoshi, but the bet is it's a group of programmers. I don't think it's a 3-letter agency. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe it. Trump's crypto pivot, genuine shift or just chasing donations?
Chasing donations.
Okay. Andrea Bocelli or Billy Joel?
Billy Joel, but I love Andrea. My daughter sings with Andrea. So Andrea, if you're listening to this, I love you. But Billy Joel is like the Long Island balladeer. The Downeaster Alexa is the Long Island national anthem. Okay, keep going.
100%. I think I know the answer to this one. Superman or Muhammad Ali?
All right, so you're going to be surprised. Okay, I'm going to go with Muhammad. Okay, now look behind me here for a second. Do you see this? Do you see this? Can you see this painting?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Superboy fighting Muhammad. That's a vintage knockoff of a cover from the 1970s. So yeah, I'm going to go with Muhammad because he's Yeah, I'm a comic book guy, and I'm going to go with Muhammad because Muhammad is a real life figure, and Superman is just Superman is who we want to be. Batman is who we are, Hank. Don't forget that, okay?
Yeah,
We're
I like
dark,
that.
we're mysterious, we really want to do good things, but we think a lot of evil shit, you know? Superman is
Yeah,
like the apotheosis of our idealism, you know? So
yeah.
Superman is
I
a
appreciate the
normative
human
thing.
element.
Yeah, but Muhammad Ali is more me. All right. I mean, who I
Love it.
aspire to be, I should say. All right, go ahead, keep going.
Love it. Last one.
Yep.
Bitcoin to 200K this year, or the Knicks win the championship.
All right, I'm going with the 200K. I'm going to tell as a Knick
200K.
fan, I just don't have the confidence. Okay, like if you said to me the Jets are winning the Super Bowl in January of 2026, I'd be like, okay, what crack pipe? This should be called like the crack pipe report. You know what I mean? As opposed to
Yeah, I
like
mean,
the blockchain report. So yeah, I just don't have the confidence. I have more confidence in Bitcoin.
I'm rooting for you guys, though. You have our old quarterback, Justin Fields. I think he just needed a good chance, so I'm rooting for you guys.
Well, listen,
So,
I like. He's a young kid. I like him.
yeah. So we've talked about the orange coin so far. I want to talk a little bit about the orange man. All right.
Well,
President Trump, he used to mock crypto. Now he's pushing pro digital asset policies and calling himself the crypto president. What do you think has changed?
I think you said it. I think he's gotten donations. He's got. Look, I mean, let's be fair to Donald Trump. He has phenomenal political instincts. So somebody went to him and said, the Democrats are shitting all over crypto and shitting all over the blockchain, and they have really bad ideas about regulating the industry. There's a group of very successful, very hardworking people in this industry. We could collect a lot of political donations from them. And oh, by the way, it's good policy. This industry should stay in the United States. Why have this industry leave the United States due to the jackass mentality of Gary Gensler and Elizabeth Warren? And I think you have to give Trump credit for that. He's like, okay, I'm down for that. Let me go give the speech. But I know he's full of it because I was there. I was in Nashville. I listened to his speech and I was laughing at the end because I know Trump. He said, oh, have fun with your Bitcoin. Did you hear him say that, Hank?
I did. I watched this.
Okay, I mean, his point, he don't give a shit. You know what I mean? He's like, okay, go. All right, God bless you. Go have fun with the Bitcoin. I'm collecting donations now, and I promise you, I'll point some pro Bitcoiners into my cabinet and into my administration, which he did, and he's way better for crypto than the Harris or Biden administration would have been.
Yeah, absolutely. He kind of lost me when.
I don't like the tariffs. I don't like some of the mania, but you got to call balls and strikes. And he's way better for us than the other side. And hopefully the other side gets the wisdom and adapts and pivots and comes towards us.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And he totally lost me when he started calling Tesla Teslers and was just going on about all the computers in it. I'm like, he doesn't really get what's happening here. But it was fun to watch, right? What did you think of the Trump coin?
Malapropisms, He's the king of malapropisms. So
is.
when he says, look at this, all computer, I mean, it's like funny, But because his brain's not working like your brain, he can't really follow the sentence structure most times. But I think the altcoin, the meme coins are ridiculous. I think that's the bad side of him. Let me just say this to our crypto enthusiasts that listen to the blockchain report, and don't forget this about Donald Trump. You get the whole buffet table, fellas. You don't go with your tray and you go up to the buffet and you ladle onto your tray the things you like, the positive taxation policy, the positive pro Bitcoin and blockchain policy, the positive stuff maybe on a tax cut extension. You don't just get that. You get everything. You get everything. You get the meme coin 72 hours before the inauguration, the raping and pillaging and rug pulling $800 million out of Melania, Trump coin, and World Liberty Financial. You get all of it. So you got to just accept that and hold your nose and deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But, it seems like those things are kind of part of the inevitable adoption cycle that we're experiencing with cryptocurrency and specifically Bitcoin, which you've actually compared to the internet boom of the 90s, which I thought was really smart because we've kind of seen that adoption cycle with checks, with credit cards, with the internet, and now we're here with Bitcoin. Where do you think we are in that timeline?
Early. to compare it to Web 1, we're like 99, 2000. We could be maybe just past 2000. Maybe the crash, the NASDAQ crash in March of 2000 would be the equivalent of the January, say the FTX debacle, the November to March, November of 22 to March 23, that crash is probably equivalent to the year 2000. So think of the upside. Think of the upside in tech from March of 2000 to where we are today. And it's like in the immortal words of Michael Saylor, I want to be in the news media cycle when the newscasters, when the blockchain report is reporting 10 years from now, Bitcoin has crashed from 850,000 to 780. And it's over for Bitcoin. What a crash. 850 to 7. I mean, we hit like, I don't know, like 78,000 like 3 weeks ago. And there were people lamenting. I'm like looking at them like, are you kidding me? So we crashed from 108 to 78 and you guys are complaining? I'm totally happy with that. So that's what's, to me, going to happen. We're going to capture the upside volatility, but we're going to get hit along the way. The best money is dead money. Okay, like
explain that.
So if you go to Charles Schwab and they did this report, the dead people do better at Charles Schwab than the living people. Do you know why that is, Hank? Dead people don't look at the money. They don't look at the money, Hank. They don't follow the account. But the rest of us are tied into the emotional roller coaster and the panic that we have with our money, and we sell at the wrong times and buy at the wrong times. Where one of the things I've learned in my 36-year career is I got a great asset, hold the asset, ignore the noise, focus on the signal, stay in the asset. Think like Steve Ballmer, stay in the asset.
That makes a lot of sense. And we kind of talked about your own aha moment with Bitcoin, and you even wrote a book called The Sweet Life of Bitcoin, or as I like to kind of call it, your crypto coming of age story. And it makes a really strong case for embracing this new financial future. So for those people in the back that still don't get it, what do you think they're missing most, and what would you tell them?
Yeah, so I put that out for my clients. I mean, that was a really sort of a pamphlet-esque sort of a book, because my clients were giving me a lot of guff. I wrote that book in 2021, and I was trying to tell people, relax, own the Bitcoin. I wrote a second book. If you don't mind, I'm going to do a little promotion for it. I wrote this book this year. It's called The Little Book of Bitcoin. It's in the John Wiley series of little books. And Michael Saylor, who we both know well, did the foreword for this book. And so this is a little denser. This is a little bit meatier than the first book. And this is basically, if you open this book, it's about personal stories into Bitcoin, how people start out as Bitcoin skeptics, and then, to quote you, what are their aha moments? Where do they start to say, oh, wait a minute, I didn't get this, but I now get this. Let me go own this. And so this book is a little bit more comprehensive than the earlier book. But I do like writing, and I do like sharing the ideas, putting them down on paper. I also think of, just as a newsflash to people listening in, if you write, you learn more from the process of writing. You're trying to explain something to somebody else, but guess what happens to you? You learn more from getting your thoughts organized and putting them down on paper like that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. They always say, the best way to learn stuff is to try to teach someone else, right? And that's very indicative of that right there.
100%. 100%.
Now, in your own journey of learning about Bitcoin and crypto and this whole universe, what do you think it means if Bitcoin keeps growing at the rate it does for the future of like traditional banking? It seems like it's kind of changing the whole industry. Where do you see it going?
Yeah, so let me draw a parallel, and I want you to think about this. When I was growing up, we had a phone. It was hooked up to the wall. It had those little touch tones on it. I'm even old enough to remember the rotary before we got the touch tones. And it was on the wall. It was a fixed asset in the house. And it was cool because you could use that asset to call other people. And everyone thought that was cool. And then when I went away as a student to Europe, if I wanted to call my parents, I had to actually go to a phone area of the post office. I had to pay for the minutes. And they would hook me into an AT&T switchboard operator that would find my parents' number in the States. And they would tell me, okay, it's $5 a minute, talk to your parents for 3 minutes, $15, then the phone line would go dead. And so now, fast forward, we're in a society now where you and I are doing this program over phone lines. And this is a
Yeah.
George Jetson sort of thing where we can talk to each other over the phone line. Moreover, if I'm hooked up to a Wi-Fi or I'm hooked up to a internet connection, because this is actually hardwired my desktop, I pay a flat fee. And so I could do hundreds of these calls. I could leave this line open all month. It's not going to cost me any more or any less money. I could go into a cafe in Rome today, 40 years ago, $15 for 3 minutes. But I could go to a cafe in Rome. I could hook up my phone to the Wi-Fi and I could make a FaceTime call or I could make a wireless phone call to my parents and it wouldn't cost me anything. And so I want you to think about that as it relates to banking. We're going to move to lower fee banking. We're going to move to more beneficiary activity for unbanked people today because it's going to be easier to bank them because the costs and the efficiencies are going to be lower. The banks will exist the same way the phone companies exist. If I said to you in 1985, listen, the price of a long distance phone call is going to zero. What's going to happen to the phone companies? Well, they're going to go out of business. No, they didn't go out of business. They adapted. And so I think the banks are going to charge you like the phone company does on wireless. They'll say, okay, for $50 a year, we'll handle these transactions. Okay. Or $100, whatever the number is, they'll come up with a different model to keep themselves in business. They'll pick up more customers, believe it or not, that are unbanked with them right now, that have smaller assets, if you will. And I think they'll end up being as profitable, if not more profitable.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it seems like that's the way the world's working. You either adapt or we don't talk about you anymore. And for their own sake, they're going to certainly need to learn to do that.
Yeah, no question.
Let me ask you just a straight up question here. What do you think at this point in time is more risky? Is it more risky to be all in on Bitcoin or to not have any exposure whatsoever?
I would say the latter. I think if you're on zero, I think you're going to miss something that's happening in the society. To quote Saylor, you have a chance right now at still a fairly low price to own a piece of the operating software of the future of finance. This is going to be a layer that we're going to use to transact with each other. And like you were talking about, a medium exchange or a store of value, doesn't matter. If it's one of those two things, you will be very well rewarded. This is like if I called you in 1999 July and I said, Hank, I just saw this wonderful presentation and forget about what Warren Buffett said about Jeff Bezos. I want you to buy. And by the way, I saw the presentation, but I'm also a time traveler. I've come back
Yeah.
from March of 2025 and I grab you by the lapel and I say, listen, just put $10,000 of your family's money in this asset. Don't look at it. And let's talk about it again in March of 2025. I'm there with Bitcoin. I think it's irresponsible not to own some Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who's obviously
Mentioned my
big
first
into
book, not to interrupt you, but you mentioned my first
No.
book. If you open up the book on Bitcoin, it says, this book is dedicated to the Scaramucci family 2040, who was so happy that the Scaramucci family in 2020 bought some Bitcoin. Okay, I'm sorry, I gotta keep going.
No, you soothsayer, you. I love it. I love that. And as someone who holds Bitcoin, you talked about how the landscape could have been very different had we had Kamala Harris in office right now. And you actually backed her in the most previous election, but now Trump is back in office. And what's your early take on how his second term has been shaping up so far?
So again, I want to call balls and strikes. I backed her because I know some of the insanity that Donald Trump represents. If you're, again, you get the whole buffet table. So you get the rhetoric on Canada being the 51st state, the visits to Greenland, and I guess we're talking about taking Greenland or maybe militarily striking Greenland. I don't know. Are we going to go after the Panama Canal? We're disavowing all of our European allies. We're siding with Vladimir Putin on the Ukrainian war. We're going to tariff everybody. And so there's not one business executive that's met with President Trump that wants the tariffs and is telling him it's going to hurt the economy. Trump's messaging in the second term, frankly, has been very poor from an economic point of view. And if you don't believe me, that's fine. Look to the market. You know, the market's down 8 or 9%. Bitcoin's corrected 20% since he came into office. And so there's chaos associated with Donald Trump. He is better, however, for Bitcoin. He is better for the blockchain. Would Harris have eventually gotten there, and would Gensler have been out of the picture eventually? Sure. Could we have grinded from where we were, 68, 69,000 to 80,000 with Harris? Possibly. Probably would have traded off a little. But could we? Yeah. Would it have gotten to 108? No. But would Harris present more American stability and more predictability? Yes. Also, what Trump's doing with these law firms, most Americans don't understand it, but he's going after these big law firms that he thinks are pro-Democrat law firms. And he's signing these executive orders that says, okay, your lawyers can't go into a federal building. So that basically shuts down all your litigation, right? And so these law firms like Paul Weiss are negotiating with him not to get penalized through executive order. I think that's just bad policy. I think when a government is turning on its people, historically, it really has not worked out well for the people or for the government. So yes, I mean, there's things about what he's doing I like. He was right about the border. He's right about some of these tariffs as it relates to China. There are things that he's right about. I don't want to be in forever wars. I understand all of that rhetoric, but I don't want to go after Canada. That border is the longest, safest, non-military, bulked up border. We have no troops on that border. Canada doesn't, we don't. As opposed to the Russian-Chinese border where there's 600,000 troops on that border. So to me, I just would like the focus to be on what's right or wrong for the country, not what's hard left or hard right.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a real smart and pragmatic way to go about it. There's going to be a mixed bag regardless of who is in office. It's just trying to find the good and meet those, right?
100%, Hank.
And we're talking about the leadership of the country right now, which kind of leads me into this next question. You mentioned previously that one of the better pieces of advice that you ever received came from someone that you've since, let's say, kind of parted ways with. I believe the quote was something to the effect of, if you get negative press, it's a sign you're doing something right. And I love that because it's complicated. Has that advice changed meaning for you over time? And do you think it's possible to still carry truth from someone you've outgrown?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. And obviously that was Donald Trump. I wrote about that in my book. This is before he became president, actually. It was 2012. I had some negative press written about me. I was very sour about it. I was in a bad mood. I went to a fundraiser with him. I sat at the table. He looked at me and said, "What the hell's wrong with you? You're usually in a good mood." And I told him what happened. And he was basically, without using the expletives he used, he said, "Hey, why are you being such a big baby? So what? You know how much negative press has been written about me? It means that you're making progress. And you can't have everybody in life like you." When I was on the campaign with him in 2016, he said something very smart. He said, about 500 million people hate me. I said, yeah, that's true. And he said, but you know what? There's 500 million people that like me. Imagine the possibilities of what we can do with the people that like me. And I think it's a good way to go through life. I think it's a good, and by the way, you're saying, was I able to, him and I are no longer friends, and I just think he's not a stable guy, so I don't want him to be president, but he's president, and so I'm American. I want him to do well. But I would just say to you that there was wisdom in what he said. I don't disavow that because we've had a falling out any more than if you have a first wife that you've had great kids with, you don't disavow things. You take the good pieces and you move forward, and I think that's what you have to do in all aspects of life. But he gave me good advice on that day. And let's face it, he is the best marketer of all time. You can hate him, but he went from being a reality television star and a real estate executive to the American presidency, slayed everybody in his path in 18 months. He lost an election, and then like Grover Cleveland, he mounted a comeback And I would argue this is the biggest comeback in U.S. political history. And so you have to admire the guy's perseverance. Again, whether you dislike the guy or whatever your feelings are on his policy, there are things to be learned from him.
Absolutely. And I mean, love him or hate him, the guy's a fighter. And, we all want what's best for America. So I think you're right. We're taking the good with the bad, kind of as we said before, and hope we're all hoping for the same thing.
100%.
So, Anthony, you've been a great sport today. And before we close this out, I want to hit you with one quote that in many ways kind of feels like the perfect way to end our conversation here today. A wise woman once said that the best among us choose not to judge human frailty so harshly. And you've lived boldly, publicly, and unapologetically from Wall Street to Washington to Web3. What does that quote mean to you today? And how has your relationship with judgment and others
impressed.
changed?
You did your homework. That's my Nana used to say that to us, and her point was about to be fair to people and also to know that they're struggling. There's a word called sonder. Have you heard of this word? It's Sonder. You can look it up if you haven't. So the word sonder, it means that you have your life, Hank. You have your ecosystem. You have two parents. I mean, maybe you're very close to them or maybe you're estranged from them. I hope you're close to them. But we have a narrative. But we have a narrative, right? I have my parents. You have your parents. You have your origin story. You have your schooling, K through 12. Maybe you went to college or law school or business school. You have your narrative. You have your family friends. And what we do is we walk by each other on the street and we're sort of depersonalizing because we just see each other as objects in our field of vision. But each person that we're walking by has sonder, has that life, has their loves, it has their challenges, has their worries, has their woes, has their opportunities. And they also have their frailty because they're human beings. I myself am frail. I've made countless decisions that were regrettable or unfortunate. And, I would say to everybody listening, if you made a bad decision in your life, shake it off. I don't wake up in the morning, kick myself in the pants and say, oh, got fired from the White House 8 years ago. Let me feel bad about myself. I've moved on. And I would just encourage people to think like that. And so when my grandmother said, the best among us choose not to judge human frailty so harshly, it was doubly meant. The meaning had two sides. It was, I'm not going to judge you, Hank, for your frailty, but I'm also not going to overly judge myself for my own frailty. I'm going to let myself slide on some of the mistakes that I've made so I can get up today and attack today with a great amount of joy and freshness without that overhang, without that millstone of regret, right? So it's a double-ended meaning. Forgive yourself and forgive others. And even if your friend did something to you that hurt your feelings, don't cut them off. Try to figure out a way to repair it.
Anthony, that's some really powerful stuff, and I appreciate the nod to Taylor Swift as well. We all got to learn to shake it off. And that's also a perfect note for us to end on. I got to say thank you so much for your insight, your energy, and your honesty. It's been a real honor and a pleasure having you with us today on Roxom TV. We will most definitely be watching what you do next and probably quoting you while we do it. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll hope to see you soon.